Welcome, and thank you for joining me on this tour of the InfoSphere Information Governance Catalog, IBM's most recent update to the leading platform for common understanding, governance and control, and visibility to all the assets in your information lifecycle. We begin this demo as a risk analyst, looking at a report, not particularly happy with the numbers, but I'm new to the organization and I need to see what credit risk score really means. So I do a quick hotkey into the glossary and I can see the definition. I see the business term in our glossary. It's a short and long description, but I believe that I want more information. I need to see more detail. So I click to see the glossary in the browser. This opens up the Information Governance Catalog, the glossary portion of that, where I can start to look at business terms and their relationship to all the other assets in my enterprise. I see the short description, the long description, which hopefully tells me a little bit more information, and I also see how it's organized. Categories are a hierarchy of business concepts, and stewardship is a very important part of governance. We can see that the Information Governance Catalog allows us to have multiple stewards. An innovative feature we call Smart Hover, which is part of the Information Governance Catalog, lets us see the details of an asset while staying in the context of the screen that we're on. I can, of course, click directly on Steward Pete Hornberger and see Pete's details. I can find additional information and might find out that he works in the same building as I do, so I can walk down to see him. Or I can also see what other assets Pete manages, which gives me better insight into the information that Pete might be a subject matter expert on. Going back to our particular business term, we see that it is governed by rules. We're going to look at how the integration of policies and governance rules is really important to the management of your overall system. General information shows that we can have what we call custom attributes added to any asset in the enterprise that's managed by the Information Governance Catalog. In this case, a URL pointing to an external document that might provide more information about credit risk scores at our company. Associated terms illustrates the relationships that exist between business concepts, and there are many different kinds. Some of them are synonyms, related terms, and a deprecated. If I see that CR score, which might be something I'm familiar with from a previous acquisition, I see now that it's deprecated. The company would prefer that I no longer use that phrase. We're going to come back to assigned assets as the relationship between business concepts or terms and assets in the enterprise is critical to our understanding of everything that we have defined in the system. We also include collections in the Information Governance Catalog, which is a way of cataloging or putting categories around numbers of items in a collection that might be appropriate for an entire team, like a risk team or everyone that's in claims, so they can focus on the assets that are important. Notes are added value metadata that stewards can place on any kind of asset as additional information as needs change, and we want to provide more detail. That brings us, of course, to history. And the history of a concept is very important as it evolves. We look here at long description and we can identify exactly when the change was made and what text was different from one addition to another. Let's get back now to the assigned assets. Here we see tables, columns, reports, and perhaps I would find additional reports that would be interesting to me. Once again, I can use the Smart Hover feature and this time open up what we call Business Lineage. Business Lineage is a high-level summary. It shows me all of the sources of where my report came from, but without showing me all the details of transformations and individual jobs. If I'm not as technical as some of the developers, I really just want to get confidence on where my report came from, and I'm not particularly concerned with all of the individual batch routines or other functions that took place to move the data there. Looking at this business lineage, I see that there is a source table called CST Credit Risk, and I'd like to see a little bit more about that table to find out how recently it was analyzed, and more importantly, how recently data quality rules were run against it. So I'll click here on the detail, which takes me directly to the page for that database table. If I'm a developer, I could actually see details like database columns, and get the metadata that's important for those, if that was interesting to me. But I really want to look at the recent analysis. Now, profiling was performed on this table against a certain number of rows, and perhaps keys can be identified, and I would at least have a comfort level of when that was analyzed in a static fashion. But more important to me are the rules that impact the governance of this value. Rules that we run on a daily basis to validate the cleanliness of our information. Information governance rules describe the business definition of our expectations for quality and belong to policies, but these point to actual data rules. The data rules are what actually run to validate the data. As we can see here, we expect that fewer than 4% of the rows are allowed to be null, or in this case, any larger error condition than 4% is going to be some sort of failure I need to recognize. We can see over time that it used to be pretty bad. I had 54 out of 184, I had nearly 30% failure. But we've gotten better, and I can now see and increase my confidence in this source because now less than 3% of the rows are now failing. So my confidence is increased, the report that I'm looking at is fed by a very valid source, and I feel more comfortable in making decisions. If I have the correct authentication, and I'm somewhat more technical and comfortable with what we call data lineage, I can do a more detailed diving into the lineage source for my report. This is what we call data lineage. It's a more intricate diagram because now it includes all the different transformations, the rules, the jobs, the processes, everything that's involved in transforming the data from the source to the target. Once again, this is a fully movable diagram. I can zoom in, I can zoom out, I can move left and right. But what's very powerful about the lineage in the Information Governance Catalog is the ability, once I'm looking at the lineage, to apply filters. Filters are important because a lineage diagram can get much more complicated than the one that you see here. I might want to segregate that lineage and only look at one part of it, perhaps what's downstream or what's upstream, or more importantly, be able to examine and filter out certain objects so I can focus on only the assets in the lineage that are controlled by the finance group, or perhaps the assets that have not been analyzed in 30 days because their quality may be questionable, or perhaps I only want to see runs since October 1st. More generic filters that are always included is the ability to see where does something come from or where does it go to. So basically looking at one half of the diagram or the other based upon the object that I started on, which in this case was the credit risk table. Looking downstream, you can see the diagram actually got much smaller, but it's merely a subset of the prior diagram, and I could immediately go back to the original diagram if I desired. So this gives us the opportunity to be very flexible, look at our sources, look at our targets, see the meaning of all these assets, and examine their quality. And so, as we've seen, the Information Governance Catalog delivers confidence to your industry regulators. It increases the productivity of your business intelligence and data integration professionals, and boosts the confidence that your decision makers have in the analytics that support strategic decisions for your enterprise. Thank you for watching.